The first time I heard his voice through the paper-thin wall, I thought it was an accident. A low, broken whisper in the middle of the night, like someone arguing with their own shadow. I pressed my ear against the wall and caught only fragments words about leaving, about being tired, about not belonging. For a while, I thought maybe the mysterious guy next door was losing his mind. Or maybe I was, because after that night, I couldn't stop listening. His name was Alex, though it took me weeks to figure that out. He had this way of keeping everyone at a distance. Like his very existence came with a warning label. Don't get too close. He skipped most social events in the dorm, brushed people off when they tried small talk, and always walked with headphones in, head lowered, like the world was too loud and he was too tired of hearing it. But there was something about him that drew me in, something I couldn't explain. Maybe it was the way he carried himself, both fragile and unbreakable at the same time. Maybe it was the flicker of sadness in his eyes whenever he thought no one was watching. Or maybe it was just the fact that loneliness recognizes loneliness. And I was lonelier than I cared to admit. I remember the night we finally spoke. It was late past midnight. The dorm was silent except for the hum of the vending machine down the hall. I'd been hunched over my laptop, pretending to study but really just scrolling mindlessly, when I heard a soft knock at my door. I opened it to find him standing there, his dark hair falling messily into his eyes, a half-empty cup of coffee in his hand. "Hey," he said, his voice rough, like he hadn't used it in hours. "Do you have any Advil?" It was such a normal request, so startlingly mundane coming from someone who seemed so untouchable, that I almost laughed. But then I noticed the tension in his jaw, the faint shadows under his eyes, and I just nodded. "Yeah, come in." He hesitated, like crossing that threshold meant something more than just stepping into a room. But he came in, and suddenly the air felt different, heavier, charged. He glanced around at my cluttered desk, the pile of books on the floor, the half-eaten bag of chips by my bed, and for the first time, I saw a flicker of something like amusement in his eyes. "You live like a raccoon," he murmured, and it was the closest thing to a smile I'd seen from him. I should have let it go. I should have handed him the Advil, said good night, and gone back to pretending he didn't exist. But something in me cracked open, and before I knew it, I was asking questions about his classes, about where he was from, about why he always looked like he carried the weight of the world on his shoulders. He didn't answer most of them, but he didn't leave either. He sat on the edge of my bed, sipping his coffee in silence, like just being in another person's presence was enough. That became our routine. Late nights when the rest of the dorm was asleep, he'd knock on my door, sometimes with an excuse, sometimes with nothing at all. And we'd sit there talking, or not talking, sharing snacks, listening to the quiet hum of the night. Slowly, piece by piece, he let me see him. Not all at once, but in fragments, his love for old rock music. The scars on his knuckles from fights he never wanted to explain. The way his father stopped calling after he came out. The way his mother pretended he didn't exist. I listened. And the more I listened, the more I fell. Of course, falling for him wasn't simple. Alex wasn't the kind of person you could just love casually. He was fire and glass, dangerous if you got too close, but impossible to ignore. Some nights, he'd lean close, his shoulder brushing mine, his eyes searching my face like he wanted to say something but couldn't. Other nights, he'd pull away, retreating back into himself, leaving me stranded in the silence he carried like armor. And me, I was caught in the middle, torn between wanting to save him and knowing that maybe he didn't want saving. One night, It all came to a head. We were sitting on my floor, the remains of a pizza box between us, when he suddenly asked, "Why do you even talk to me?" The question hit me like a punch. I looked at him, at the way his fingers twisted the hem of his hoodie, at the raw vulnerability in his eyes, and I realized he genuinely didn't know. "Because I want to," I said quietly. "Because you make the nights less empty." For a long moment, he just stared at me. Then he leaned forward, so close I could feel his breath on my skin, and whispered, "You don't know what you're getting into." But I did. Or at least, I thought I did. That night, when he brushed his hand against mine tentative, trembling, it felt like the start of something I couldn't walk away from, no matter how much it might hurt. The weeks that followed were messy in a way that only college nights could be half-finished assignments. Skipped lectures. Endless cups of coffee. But Messier still was Alex. He had this way of pulling me close and then pushing me away, like he was testing how much I could take before I'd finally let go. Some nights he was warm, open, leaning against me with that rare, crooked smile that felt like a secret gift. Other nights, he locked himself in his room, his music blasting through the wall, and I knew better than to knock. Still, I kept waiting for the moments when he'd let me back in. The breaking point came on a Friday in late November. The air was sharp with cold, the kind that seeped into your bones. I came back from class and found him sitting on the floor outside his door, his hands shaking, his eyes bloodshot. "They called me again," he muttered without looking up. I knew who he meant. His father. The one who thought silence could erase a son. "What did he say?" I asked carefully. "That I should stop embarrassing the family. That I should fix myself." His voice cracked on the last words. Something inside me snapped. I dropped my bag and knelt in front of him, forcing him to look at me. "Alex, you're not broken. You don't need fixing." For a moment, he just stared at me like he couldn't believe the words. Then he shook his head, pulling away. "You don't get it. People leave. They always leave." I didn't think. I just reached for his hand, lacing my fingers through his. "Then let me be the one who doesn't." The silence that followed was unbearable, heavy with everything unspoken. And then, finally, he leaned forward, resting his forehead against mine, his breath warm and shaky. "Don't make promises you can't keep," he whispered. "I'm not," I whispered back. That was the first night he kissed me. Not the reckless, fiery kind of kiss you see in movies, but something quieter, almost desperate, like he was afraid I'd disappear if he let go. My heart raced, my hands trembling as I pulled him closer. And in that moment, the world outside, the parents who didn't understand, the classmates who whispered it didn't matter. It was just us, two boys in a cramped dorm room, finding something worth holding on to. But love wasn't enough to erase his fear. There were setbacks. Days when he avoided me in the cafeteria. Nights when he drowned himself in music instead of knocking on my door. And one awful weekend, he disappeared completely. Gone to some party where he drank until he passed out on a stranger's couch. I found out only after, when he showed up at my room smelling of smoke and regret. His voice hoarse as he muttered, "I don't deserve you." I wanted to yell at him. I wanted to shake him until he understood that he was wrong, that he mattered, that he wasn't alone. But instead, I just pulled him into my arms and held him until he stopped trembling. Because sometimes love isn't about fixing someone. Sometimes it's just about staying. Finals came and went, the semester ending in a blur. On our last night before winter break, We sat on the dorm roof, wrapped in blankets against the December chill. The campus below was quiet, dotted with the glow of streetlights and the faint sound of car tires on wet pavement. "I'm scared," he admitted, his voice barely audible over the wind. "Of what?" "Of going home. Of losing this." I turned to him, brushing a strand of hair from his face. "You won't lose me. Not unless you want to." He looked at me, then really looked at me for the first time. There was no wall, no mask, just him. Vulnerable, hopeful, afraid. "I think I'm falling for you," he whispered. My chest tightened, not with fear but with something warmer, steadier. I smiled, leaning in until our lips met again. Softer this time. Certain. "I already did," I said. And under the wide American sky, surrounded by the hum of a city that didn't care who we were or who we loved, we let ourselves believe in something simple, that maybe, just maybe, two boys in a dorm could write their own ending. Winter break came, and he went home to face the cold silence of his family. But this time, he wasn't alone. He called me every night, his voice softer now, less brittle. And when he came back in January, standing in the dorm hallway with a duffel bag slung over his shoulder, he didn't hesitate. He walked straight to me, pulled me into his arms, and kissed me in front of everyone. The whispers didn't matter. The stares didn't matter. What mattered was the way his hand gripped mine, like he'd finally decided not to let go. It wasn't perfect. It never would be. But love doesn't have to be perfect to be real. And as we stood there, two boys in love in a world that tried to tell us otherwise, I realized something. Those late nights in the dorm weren't just about loneliness anymore. They were about finding light in the dark, finding courage in fear, finding each other. And for the first time, neither of us felt broken. Thank you for listening. Don't forget to like and subscribe to stay updated with the latest videos.